You see the BBC thing? The BBC thing is crazy. The head of BBC had to resign because they took a film of Trump from January 6th, the speech that he gave, and they edited it so something that he said 52 minutes later, they put right after one he said something to make it look like he was trying to get people to go attack people and fight at the Capitol.
They
do
that to you all the time.
But this one's nuts. This not only is this one nuts, but this one is for a literal president of the greatest country the world's ever known. He's the president, and you're lying about what he said publicly, which is on the internet, which anybody can see. Like, it is the clearest indication of how that woke shit was rotting people's brains. And is still, but just less. You know what I mean? It was on the march then, and they all felt like they had to go along with it. And so, and by any means necessary, we must make sure that, so they decided to paint a different version of what he said. And they're fucked now. They're fucked.
BBC?
60 Minutes did it with the Kamala Harris interview, but they did it the other way. They made it look like she had a good answer, which is it's so crazy. Like, you guys are supposed to be the news.
Right.
You're not supposed to be the propaganda arm of whatever party you support. This is nuts.
Boy. So we got to talk about the BBC taking a pounding from President Trump as he is threatening a massive $1 billion lawsuit due to the fact that they deceptively edited a clip of President Trump giving a speech on January 6th where they made it seem like President Trump made a direct call to violence. I want to go ahead and show you guys the BBC edit versus the original clip, and you guys can be the judge for yourself.
We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
Yeah, so I just want to play it again because I want to show you guys why I believe that this was definitely done on purpose. This was done with malice.
We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell.
Yeah, so the reason why I believe that this was definitely done on purpose is because of the fact that they didn't put any type of transition in between that, right? Usually, like when I edit videos, okay, and I am editing people talking, okay, you can't play the whole thing, right? You want to play the parts that people need to hear, okay, in order to get the context of the conversation. But a lot of you guys sometimes complain and you say, well, you're playing clips of other people too long. Well, the reason why I do that is because I don't want to deceptively edit any clips of what anybody's saying to make them seem like they're saying things that they're not saying. I don't want to do that. I actually go out of my way to make sure I don't do that. So when you're splitting a clip, usually to make it clear to the viewer that this is a different part of the conversation, that it's not a continuous clip, you insert a transition. Like, for example, watch this. Boom. You see that transition? Yeah. So if I insert a transition like that, that means that, hey, this is a different part of the conversation, or it's a different sentence, or there was some things that were cut out in between for the sole purpose of shortening the clip so that people can get the gist of the conversation, the context of the conversation, but just understand that that wasn't a continuous sentence. Like it was cut out. Some things were cut out in between, that is not the same part of the conversation, right? That is typically what you would do, okay? Because again, you can't show everything. Everybody knows that. So in a speech like the speech that President Trump gave on January 6th, yeah, I mean, as a news outlet, you might want to make sure that you're not editing a clip in a way that anybody can interpret the president saying something or doing something that he actually didn't do or he didn't say. But the BBC, somebody purposely edited this clip and said, you know what, I'm going to take this part of President Trump telling people to go to the Capitol, and then I'm going to take the part where he says fight, 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 and I'm going to clip it together with no transition, right? No clear transition to show that, hey, these are two different parts of the speech, right? No transition to make it seem like a continuous thing. And that's, in my opinion, how I know it was done with malice, because I edit videos all day, right? I edit my own videos, and I know how this goes, right? I know how the thought process goes and what I'm thinking about when I'm editing clips and editing conversations. And yeah, this definitely was done on purpose, 100%. So this footage aired before the election in some type of program or special that they had. And now they are apologizing to the president due to the fact that President Trump has threatened legal action against the BBC, including suing them for over $1 billion.
BBC is apologizing to President Trump for a misleading edit of his January 6th speech in a documentary. But the dispute over that edit may now move toward a legal battle. The president has threatened a $1 billion lawsuit, saying that the edit caused serious damage unless the film is fully retracted and that he is compensated. The BBC says the documentary is off the air and it will not pay any compensation. The fallout has already shaken the network, with 2 executives stepping down. That happened earlier this week. Joining us now, Tyler O'Neill, senior editor at the Daily Signal. Thank you so much for joining us. How big of a deal is this for the BBC to publicly apologize to a U.S. president?
Yeah, I think this sets a very strong precedent. I mean, what we see, President Trump has demanded more than this, but at the same time, he has gotten a historic apology from the BBC for splicing these two things together. Now, the BBC is claiming that it was not the BBC themselves who made the decision to splice together the quotes that gave the impression of President Trump encouraging his supporters to be violent and to attack the Capitol. But, you know, they're still taking some responsibility. They're still apologizing. We still had these resignations. It remains to be seen if President Trump is going to consider this apology enough. As you said, he's demanded more than an apology. He has also been successful in suing other media companies, mostly in the United States, for defamation when they have made claims that have twisted his words and presented him in very negative lights.
What are you hearing, Tyler? Might there be more resignations before this is all said and done?
I'm not certain we would expect more resignations, but I do think what we're going to hear, we're next hearing probably from the president himself, if he is going to accept this apology or if he is going to consider legal action. When it comes to legal action, he's going to face a few hurdles. I believe the statute of limitations for filing a defamation lawsuit in UK law has just passed on this particular issue, but he might be able to sue in U.S. courts.
What does this situation say about the pressure newsrooms face when covering political people?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. Newsrooms have to be fair and accurate in presenting what political figures like President Trump actually say. And so in this instance, you had a very clear situation where quotes were spliced out of context. If you listen to Trump's entire speech, you know, he said that it's perfect. I'm not certain about that. But I do know that he said repeatedly that he wanted his supporters to be peaceful in their protest. And he did not call for them to fight like hell in attacking the Capitol in the way that his words were spliced to suggest in this video recording.
And due to that splicing, how big of a fracture does this cause in the trust for the BBC?
I think it's going to be a very negative scandal for the BBC. We've seen the BBC under fire for the way that they presented Brexit and suggested that it was, a Russian, essentially a Russian influence campaign in the past. And we've seen many conservative MPs taking stands against the BBC in the past. I think this is going to lead to more opposition to the BBC. And I also think, one of the interesting things to come out of this is seeing that U.S. taxpayer dollars actually ended up funding the BBC to some extent indirectly through USAID. I think that is something that conservatives in the United States are going to have serious concerns about, given this splicing scandal.
Interesting. Tyler O'Neill, thank you so much.
Yeah, so you've seen that, you heard that. Again, I'm not buying the apology or the explanation from the BBC because I know how this goes. And there's somebody that, from an editorial perspective, had the responsibility of reviewing the documentary, the program, to make sure that stuff like this didn't happen, right? That, hey, we're not clipping the speech out of context, trying to make the president say something that he really didn't say. Somebody had the responsibility of doing that, and somebody had to sign off on it before it was aired. Now, you do have executives who have resigned from their positions due to this. However, yeah, I think a lawsuit is appropriate for sure, 100%. These media outlets are getting away with propaganda and trying to deceptively edit clips to push a narrative on behalf of a political party or a political agenda. Okay, we see this happen in the United States all the time. Okay, right now, I personally think that the president should be looking at suing a lot of individuals on MSDNC, BS now, when it comes to the Epstein stuff, right? A lot of people need to be sued for that because, I mean, they're not even hiding anymore. They're just straight up calling the president a pedophile, right? You had George Slopopotamus at ABC essentially called the president a rapist. ABC was punished for that. Yeah, I mean, they're just saying these things. They're making these claims with no evidence, right? These false claims. And then, you know, they don't think that they should be punished for it, right? They want to boohoo, whine, and cry because they're not allowed to just openly call the president a rapist and a pedophile, right? And again, in this story right here with the BBC, yeah, they're editing the clip to try to make it seem like the president called for a violent attack on the Capitol when that's clearly not what he did in the speech. But it just conveniently fits the narrative from the left about President Trump's speech. So President Trump apparently is rejecting the apology from the BBC, and he is going to move forward with punishing them with a lawsuit. So let's get into it.
To Donald Trump after one of their programs edited a speech he gave in 2024 before the last election.
A major talking point in the US, of course, has been Donald Trump's threat to sue the BBC now after that Panorama program edited up his January the 6th speech, trying to fit him up as encouraging violence that followed down there at those riots at Capitol Hill. Here's a reminder of what the BBC put to air.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Yeah, that was 100% done on purpose. And that was done with a professional level edit. Okay, you wouldn't be able to tell just with the naked eye that, hey, this was spliced up unless you heard the whole speech and you know, okay, he didn't actually say that. So, yeah, I mean, this is really bad, right? Like, this is really, really, really bad. It is super obvious that whoever edited that, whoever signed off on it, they did it with an agenda. It was 100% done with malice. This is really bad.
Now, this sort of egregious editing and misleading media coverage doesn't really surprise a lot of us, but as I put to our US contributor Kristen Tate, Donald Trump certainly won't be taking this lying down.
Good for him. I mean, this was broadcast 1 week before the 2024 presidential election here in the United States. The BBC did this intentionally. They took out the parts of Trump's speech from January 6th, 2021, where he repeatedly said for his protesters to be peaceful. It's absolutely deceptive editing. This potentially reached tens of millions of people on all of the BBC's various platforms. And they are right to be called out by Trump. Some higher ups at the BBC have already stepped down over this controversy. And look, you know, Chris, it's okay to have an opinion. That's fine. It happens all the time on TV. What's not okay is to disguise an opinion as hard news. You know what that is? That is actually trying to interfere with an election, which is exactly what this was. And good on Trump for calling them out. I hope they pay up.
Trump was furious with the edit and threatened to sue the BBC for over $1 billion.
Are you going ahead and suing the BBC?
Well, I guess I have to. You know, why not? Because they defrauded the public, and they've admitted it, and their top echelon.
Director General and the CEO
This is
resigned.
within one of our great allies. You know, this is supposedly our great ally. BBC, the government has a chunk of that one, I guess, but that's a pretty sad event. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up. But it was very dishonest, and the head man quit, and a lot of the other people.
The BBC went into meltdown and then desperately apologised to Trump.
This all started with the Panorama edit. I've just got this in. This is just breaking news, Emma, which relates to this story. We're just hearing that the BBC has apologised to Donald Trump over the editing of a speech which appeared on Panorama in 2024, adding it was an error of judgment and the programme will not be broadcast again in this form on any BBC platform. So that's the BBC apologising directly to the President of the United States over the editing of a speech that appeared on Panorama in 2024. But Emma, by the sounds of it, there might be another apology to make.
Yeah, so that was the one that's caused such a furore over the last week or so that resulted on Sunday night in the Director General of the BBC, the big boss, Tim Davie, resigning. Also, the Chief Executive of BBC News, Deborah Turness, both of those leaving their roles. Then the BBC Chair apologising for what he called an error of judgment. So this really has been the focus of enormous attention.
And in another blow, it has come out that this was not an isolated incident.
Now we're talking about this Newsnight programme, and what's really interesting about it, according to the Telegraph, who've broken this story, a live guest straight after that speech was played out on Newsnight pointed out that it had been cut incorrectly, changing the meaning. And according to the Telegraph, nothing was done on air to say apologise or to address that.
Yeah, to alert people that it had happened.
Yeah, and then the next morning in an editorial meeting, it said that it was discussed there, concerns were raised, nothing was done then. There has been a response from the BBC, a BBC spokesperson saying the BBC holds itself to the highest editorial standards. This matter has been brought to our attention and we are now looking into this.
Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed Trump will be taking legal action over the incidents.
Thank you, Bev. There's a lot of questions in one there. I will say I know the president has a very good relationship with Prime Minister Starmer. You have been there. You've seen them in their interactions. You've questioned both leaders in your time joining us when we've gone to the United Kingdom a few different times now. However, he has always been very frank when he disagrees with leaders, even whom he has a good relationship with. And the BBC, being a fair news organization, is definitely an outlet. I think these two leaders would disagree. The president has made it very clear that this is a leftist propaganda machine that is unfortunately subsidized by British taxpayers, and he thinks that's extremely unfortunate for the great people of the United Kingdom and Great Britain. And I think that the president was deeply concerned by the editing, the purposeful and dishonest editing of his speech that was so clearly fake news, and he rightfully dubbed that term many years ago, and this is a classic example of that. We see it in the United States all the time. We see it now in the United Kingdom. As you know, the president's external legal counsel has filed a lawsuit against the BBC. We expect that to continue, and whether they apologize or not is up to them.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. I agree with the president. He should move forward. Now, liberal media, they're going to gaslight the BBC, and they're going to say, oh, you have to stand up to Trump. You can't fold. They're already upset that the BBC apologized, right? But if they fold to the lawsuit, right, if they issue some type of settlement, right, some type of financial payout, they're going to be super upset with that because we've already seen other outlets fold to Trump. So, yeah, this one's the worst, right? This is the most egregious. I mean, outside of the George Slopopotamus one, that one's pretty bad too. But this one is really bad, okay? I mean, I can tell you personally that was done with malice. And, I mean, this is just par for the course when it comes to the media nowadays, right? They don't care. They don't care. They try to present their opinions as news, as fact, when it's not. It's just opinion. And in this situation, the BBC purposely edited a speech from President Trump and changed the meaning of what he said through purposely, deceptively editing different parts of the speech together to make, again, it seem like the president called for violence, direct violence that day, which he did not do. Again, that conveniently fits the narrative that the liberal media, that the left, that the Democrats, I guess also the liberals in the UK too, right? The left in the UK too, that they want to push against the president. So yeah, the BBC has to be punished. And I hope that President Trump punishes them thoroughly, right? So we're going to see. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.